Celia. Oh, we'll try to do it this way. So, we started working on these comics books, and so far we've managed to publish 4. You've got all the covers of these comic books. Love in the Shadow of Death, Vito's Report, Sacrifice, and Bearers of Secrets. Here we've got a few comments by the people who actually supported us from the very beginning, among them Kazimierz Smoleń, why he actually decided that it was worth trying. He used to say that whatever way we use to tell the truth, it is fine with it, as long as it's true. So he was a great supporter of this whole idea. Also Piotr Trojański, you might be familiar with this one too. He also works for the Pedagogical University in Krakow and in Auschwitz. So he also saw a great potential in using those comic books as an educational tool. Remember one of those objectives, staying true to the facts and to the realities of the camp, in texts, of course, but also on the graphic level. So here you can actually compare the photograph of the characters with the drawings from the comics. So the artists did quite a good job. They're quite similar, and in most of the cases, at least. Maybe not so much in the faces, but then we've got a few places here as well. You may recognize some of them. So at the very top, that is standing cells in the basement of Block 11, the camp prison. Edek was imprisoned there at one point for a few nights. And then, of course, the brick barracks in Birkenau and Blockführerstube, this great water tank in the men's camp. That was the place of public executions during the evening roll calls in Birkenau, in the men's camp. More places, the cell of Maximilian Kolbe, the character from the 3rd episode, and the ruins of Crematorium 2. Then the sauna building, where the new arrivals were processed next to Canada warehouses, and the unloading ramp in Birkenau. More places, the death wall, the place of executions by shooting, the furnaces of Crematorium 1, the kitchen right behind the gate, Arbeit macht frei, and a few buildings in Auschwitz. So I think that the artist did quite a good job, at least in my opinion. So, but well, you're free to express a different one, of course. And here we are, episode 1. So that's the one about Mada and Elek. I'm sure that you know the story. Their failed escape, them being brought back to the camp for interrogation and their executions. Witold's report, that's about Witold Pilecki. Quite often he's also called a volunteer to Auschwitz. In 1940, not much was known about Auschwitz in occupied Poland. Witold Pilecki was from the very beginning, from 1939, from the invasion of Poland, very much engaged in fighting with Germans. So he allowed himself to be captured in a roundup, in a street roundup in Warsaw, and he eventually ended up in Auschwitz. He kept sending reports to the Polish underground about what was going on there. He also started organizing the resistance there. In 1943, he escaped, and in Italy, he joined the Polish Second Corps, Anders' army. And he also wrote a detailed report on the situation in occupied Poland, on the situation in Auschwitz. After the war, however, after the war, however, he was imprisoned by the communists because anybody belonging to the Polish Home Army was considered sort of a criminal, while Pilecki was also connected to Anders and London, so it was more complicated. And as the enemy of the state, he was imprisoned by the communists in Warsaw, in Mokotów prison. He was interrogated, finally executed, and considered a traitor. For years, nobody would speak about him. The children at school were not taught about Pilecki. Just like we didn't know about Katyn, so the massacre in Katyn and the Soviet invasion of Poland in 1939, so it wasn't present in Polish history books. That's his story, and it's told a little different than the first one. While the first one is in sort of a chronological order, here we've got flashbacks and bubbles again. Flashbacks. So his story about his stay at Auschwitz is told from the perspective of his interrogation in a communist prison. You can also use this particular book to show two kinds of totalitarian systems, Nazis and the communists. They're of course different, but you can use the comic to teach about both. So that's also potential, this particular one. Sacrifice, it's about Father Kolbe, Maximilian Kolbe, the priest who volunteered to die of starvation instead of another prisoner. It's more for the Polish audience because it touches the religious aspect of Auschwitz. At some point in Pawiak he meets a Jewish prisoner. They just talk about it, and you're probably aware that Father Kolbe is sort of a controversial figure. So we also show his life before the Second World War, and his articles published which contain anti-Semitic elements are mentioned as well. But of course, then in the camp, his attitude changes a little. So it's not entirely Polish and Catholic; it's merged. So you can also try to explain differences. You can exploit each of these comic books differently. It's your creativity, your invention. And number 4, which so far is the last one, The Bearers of Secrets. That's a translation of the German term Geheimnistrager. So that's how the prisoners who knew the secrets of the operation of Auschwitz were called officially by the Germans in the German documents, and this particular story is the story of Sonderkommando. You may ask why so late, why such an important subject came as the 4th episode. That's because it's important and it's difficult. We didn't want to start with something so important without experience. So we had like a list of subjects ready, and from the very beginning we knew that we wanted to show this story, but we decided that we have to do it later because it's important.
Well, chronologically, it's also later.
It's also later.
It's also after. Later.
But we needed some time to approach this topic. So that's why it came as hopefully not the last one. We still have a lot of ideas for the future. But takes time. Birth secrets. And now, how do you make a comic book? In a way, it's similar to making a film, because you start with a script. You start with a script, and once Michał got all these books and the story he was going to write about, he presented, after a few months, he presented us with a script. And then we had to read the script, and we had to correct all these points which were wrong. Then the script was read by the historians, and they pointed some other things which were wrong. So finally we got it right. Once we decided that the script is okay, the graphic artist started with a layout. You have to just plan all these scenes in the space, so on one page. So that's the next step, the layout. Then you've got pencil sketch, ink, and unless it's a black and white version, that's the end. But since we decided that it should be in color, you have a few more steps ahead of you, so making colorful pages. And finally, the dialogues. And then you have to think carefully where to put them, so as not to cover the most important part of the picture. Because it's a combination of words and pictures.
Who made this part? The comics?
The dialogue, that was in the script. So it's not just the whole story, but the dialogues are included in the script too. And then there are corrections and proofreading and all kinds of different things, and then all these texts, glossary, and so on and so forth. So that's how it's made. In the case of historical comics, there's a lot of those corrections on every stage of the work, because everything had to be approved by the historians. So the script and then the pictures and everything. Right. So that's how it's done. And with these books, it's sort of like with children. You bring them into the world. You put every possible effort to bring them up right, and then at some point you have to let them go. And that's what happened with the comics once they left the printing house. So they were out in the world. We had ideas about them, how they should function in the world, but we couldn't control that. We had no control over what was going to happen. Somehow the media learned about this idea. First, the local media, there were a few articles published in the local press in Święcim, in Krakow. Then it got a little bigger, and we were surprised to hear from Reuters. Everybody knows Reuters. There was a small interview with Kazimierz Smolin and me, and it just went all over the world. There was an article from Agence France Presse. In this one, we got an approval from Michael Szudrych, the chief rabbi of Poland. He said, well, according to him, it's okay. It's an okay idea. It was very important for us. Media. And then there were other possibilities, meetings with others, workshops for students, exhibitions, textbooks. Let me show you some graphic material to each one of these. So meetings with authors followed in libraries and schools. If it was in a school or a library, we tried to combine a meeting with the graphic designers, graphic artist, with a lecture. If it was about Pilecki, we would take Dr. Cyra and he would tell his story. Sometimes there was a context organized, like children drew pictures or posters, design posters, so there were all kinds of activities. Once these comics were published, the international, that's short for International Center for Education about Auschwitz and Holocaust at Auschwitz Museum. So once it was published, they also included workshops with students based on comic books and other source material in their educational offer as well. So
Was this published in Polish as well?
yes,
Okay.
The first 4 are in Polish and English. The first one right now is available in 9 languages. So it's also in Czech, German, French, Italian, Dutch. Yes, that's right. Swedish, Norwegian. That's it.
Anybody works on the Hebrew translation?
No Hebrew version yet. With Hebrew version, we'll have to reset everything because back.
Backwards, right.
So it's also the pictures. So the layout would have to be completely different. No?
Yiddish.
So maybe in Yiddish. Okay. But well, we are open to ideas. If we find anybody interested in publishing this one in Hebrew, you're welcome. But it's in Poland. It's difficult, it's difficult to find a person who would translate that right, and then you have to have an Israeli graphic artist to reset everything. So, but it's possible. It's possible. Books are translated into Hebrew. They're translated from Hebrew into other languages. So where there is a will, there's a way. Right, so we were talking about workshops, and there were exhibitions in Krakow, in other places. And then the first surprise, our child, one of the surprises, we didn't expect that at all. One of the pages from our comic books made its way into a textbook for Polish literature. That was never in our plans. But then Wydawnictwa Szkolne I Pedagogiczne, that's one of the major publishers of textbooks, they approached us last year and asked if they could use a page from the comic about Zombie Commando in their textbook. As you can see, it's right next to Tadeusz Borowski. This way to the costumes, ladies and gentlemen. So it's simply about presenting the history of Auschwitz and the Holocaust in 2 different literary kinds. So graphic way through comic books and literature, Borowski. So that was a great surprise. We were really happy that somebody thought that our work was worth just including it in a textbook. So that was one surprise, and then there was another one. It turned out that it was an inspiration for inmates being re-educated in various prisons in Poland. Because a few years ago, the Educational Center from Auschwitz launched a joint project with penitentiary institutions in Małopolska, so Krakow region and Upper Silesia, and then the Warsaw region joined last year. And they have this exhibition, which is like in the background of the photograph, a traveling exhibition which is shown in different prisons. And then they have like workshops for the inmates and so on. They come to visit the museum as well. And sometimes as a follow-up activity, they are asked to write short impressions of their stay, of what they learned, or if they don't like writing, they can draw. So there are also workshops using the comic books, because quite often these inmates are not very well educated, not inclined, not really keen on reading. So picture is something which is more effective in teaching them. So that's one of the drawings made by one of those prisoners. Quite a good one. Quite a good one.
Yeah.
So that was also something we could not predict when we were beginning the work in 2008. It was normal that it would be for children at school, maybe as a follow-up activity after the visit to the museum and so on, but we never expected that the comic books would be used as part of re-education. We also have a website, so for those readers who are not part of any group that can participate in an activity as a workshop or at school, there are some kind of quizzes, so well, there are all kinds of options. Okay.